Hey friends and neighbors, we've been talking so much about DNS and I've been using a tool called nslookup, but we haven't really talked about it. So I thought I'd take just a minute to focus in on the tool itself. So yes, Alex, I'd like tools that begin with the letter N for 500. So what is nslookup? What have we been doing all this time? Well, it is a command line tool to query the domain name system. And I will say the domain name system because you don't have to stay on your server. It can be interactive or non-interactive, which means that you can either fire a single request off, or you can open up the console and then you can do a whole bunch of queries all at one go. So the most common things that we do is change the query type, and we just specify, what we're looking for with what we put on the command line, and then nslookup figures out how to construct the DNS query message that we need. So we can do forward and reverse queries. These are by far the most common. But as you saw, you can also do CNAME records and all kinds of things, although your client has no idea that they're actually CNAME records. Now we can also say we'll do more with recursion. Do we want to do an iterative query? Do we want to do recursion so you can turn these things on and off? And it is available in Windows and Linux systems. There's also an online version. If you don't want to fool around with the command line and you're not familiar, you can just type it into the website and get a lookup. So you can aim nslookup at another server. I'll show you how to do that. It won't work on my system right now because I'm isolated, but there you have it. I'll show you how to do it. And the key is that running nslookup generates DNS queries. We generate DNS queries for almost everything that we do, going to a website, pinging by name, things of that sort. nslookup is there to generate queries. That's all that it does, really. There are a couple of related things that we do, fingerprinting or finger, and whois. There are a couple of sources that you can look at, the man pages. You can also see a lot of information out at IANA, and of course, the docs for whatever operating system you're running. This has actually been a part of Bind for a long, long time. And you don't have to believe me. Here's the man page that goes along with it, right? So this is nslookup query internet name servers interactively. So that's what it does. That's the whole point of nslookup. Really, really handy tool. Now before we do an example, remember those zone files? Well, when you look at the zone file, I guess it's good to think about exactly how that query is constructed and how the answer comes back. So for example, when we query client.1, first of all, when you query client.1, that's sort of meaningless because there's no domain associated with it. So that's where we would need that search string to begin, or to have a point where we can begin the search. So in resolve.config, we would have, in my case, I have bruce.com there. So the client would already know that it would be client1.bruce.com. When it gets to a zone file, though, you are looking for client.1. Well, the query comes in, and with the origin statement, what this says is that I'm going to take that origin statement and append it to all of these records here. Now, you don't have to have an origin statement in a zone file, but it's often used. So we grab client1, the resource record associated with client1. We append bruce.com. We find out that it's the class is internet, and then we find out that it's an address record. So that lines up nicely with this record here, and here is the answer, 172.16.02. And so that's what we would expect, and that's how it's actually constructed, and that's the interaction between the origin and the host name, and that's how you build a fully qualified domain name. Same thing is true with the reverse, right? We have the origin statement up top, and we come in with a query, 172.16.02. It's just the reverse of what we were doing before. So we have the origin, so we grab 2 from down here, right? We're not grabbing 2 records, we're grabbing the number 2 from the left-hand side, and then we append the origin statement. But it looks kind of funny, right? And that has everything to do with where the most specific information is and the fact that this is reverse. So we flop it over and we say, oh, 172.16.02. So we understand that that's the IP address that we're looking for, and so we're looking for a pointer query or a PTR, and we get the associated name with that. And that's how that is constructed. So when we generate things from nslookup, That's how they're built. Now the client or the resolver actually has the text on the command line that it goes to that, but I'll show you an example here in a sec. So first of all, I'll show you that I've got an active capture going, and I'm filtering on DNS, but nothing up my sleeve. There's nothing that's happened so far. Let's take a look at the VM. So here is my client, and the first thing that I want to show you is that, there you go, Linux is case sensitive, everybody. So if we take a look here, I've got this search string bruce.com and the name server, which is why we know A, where to look automatically with nslookup, but also we have this search string that we can append to any query that we make. So we know that there's no captures going on. So let's first do an nslookup. Whoops. That's not interactive. We'll just do one on the command line here, and we'll say we're going to look for client 1.bruce.com. And that's it. So we can see that it just gave me the answer. Well, let's take a look at what Wireshark has to say. So here's Wireshark, and here's the query that we just did. Right, so we know that this was a forward query. So there's the question that I'm going to ask. Well, I'm asking one question. Here is client 1.bruce.com, and there's the type. Well, we know it's a type A because the default query type when you're doing a forward lookup or when you type in the text is going to be an address record. The answer that comes back is the IP address structured as we just saw it. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. Now for this one, we will go to just the interactive version, right? So now I've got this sort of interface to nslookup, and we'll do ns1.bruce.com, and the answer comes back. And I could do another query right now, and maybe we'll do Dr. H. Well, how does it know that I've got to do drh.bruce.com? Well, that's because that entry in resolve.config. So there we have it. And we can see that, oh my goodness, I just generated a whole bunch of queries back and forth. So here is the one for bruce.com. There's the one for Dr. H, and it comes back and says, oh, that's a C name. And here is the additional information, the actual details for your query, right? It finally gets back to the record for which it is, or with which it is associated, and here's the name server that it came from, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there we have it. That's nslookup. So nslookup is a command line querying tool, and you can generate all of the things. Now I did tell you that I was going to show you how to change the server. It's actually really straightforward. If I wanted to change the server, I would do something like this and just hit enter, and now it says, okay, you're going to look someplace else. Now my VMs here are isolated, so it wouldn't work, but you can see that it just said, okay, let's go to that server instead. And if I wanted to go back, this is the name of the actual server. And of course, this is also pulled from resolve.config or from DHCP or wherever you got your server. Well, there you have it. There's nslookup. It's really, really good tool just to try to understand where in the world you are, where your answers are coming from, and also to be able to test the server. Long before I opened up my server to allow the client to query the server across, VMnet 8, I was testing the server locally, which is an indication that clients and servers are, built in together. So the server was a client at the same time that it was a server. So being able to test your server is really, really, really handy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe if I helped, and may your nslookup queries always reach the authoritative server that you're aimed at.